I think we can start. 7 o'clock in Singapore, 4:30 in India, 12 o'clock in Central European time. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Please welcome to our webinar. Just to check whether you can hear me loud and clear, if you can please raise your hand. Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, that's great. So welcome to our webinar. It's exciting to see so many participants are interested in sales enablement and sales readiness, and taking a lot of keen interest in this subject. It is really growing globally. My name is Chari, NK Chari. I'm the CMO of Streams. We are a SaaS company providing an innovative AI-powered sales readiness platform for enterprises. Let me run through the agenda and the speakers, and we have an exciting lineup of interesting speakers and a very exciting set of topics which people are going to be covering. And so let me just introduce the speakers and the topics, the agenda. So after a quick, very quick editorial of Streams, we'll have our first speaker. First speaker would be Mary Shia. She is a principal analyst at Forrester and thought leader would be the right way to describe her. She's written a lot of interesting papers on sales enablement and sales readiness, and she really enables B2B sales and marketing professionals with information, insights to both technology and how sales and marketing organizations are innovating and changing as we go forward. She was an adjunct professor previously, before she was in Forrester, and she analyzes how solutions and technologies are transforming this whole sales and marketing marketplace, for a better word. She'll be giving a keynote presentation and on scaling sales readiness and talking about sales readiness, followed by Sumit Vadva. Sumit is a global EV and growth unit director at Castrol, British Petroleum, and he has driven a number of innovative, digital innovative strategies in his career, and has considerable experience in B2B, B2B2B, B2B2C, and B2C marketing and sales and channels and strategy. He'll be sharing insights on how Castrol has scaled sales readiness and what are the challenges they face. And it's a very innovative case study, and I think it'll be very exciting to hear from him. He'll be followed by Harley Young. Harley is the head of partner solutions at AWS, Amazon Web Services. His team across ASEAN works with AWS partners like us to achieve technology and business aspirations. He will share insights on how AWS enables scaling, what are the challenges, and how to innovate with scaling. And we will end the webinar with a small talk from Kushal Bhaumik. He's the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer of Streams, and he has got a lot of keen interest in understanding behavioral sciences with salespeople, being a sales manager himself in his past career. And he will share how organizations can measure sales readiness and what kind of ideas can be put in place to measure sales readiness. So we have a very exciting roundup. I hope all these topics will be exciting for everybody, and I really look forward to these presentations. So before I sort of let you on the first presentation, let me give a quick editorial on Streams. It's going to be just for 2 minutes. So just about Streams, basically, we are a Singapore headquartered company, and we have actually worked with a lot of leading enterprises to deploy sales readiness and sales enablement solutions. Our solutions are being used in 200,000 sales users, by 2,000 sales users in 74 countries and 31 languages. So our customers are really wanting to change the way how they get their distributed sales teams ready. And these distributed sales teams can be direct, indirect, can be channel, can be even transient sales teams who are sort of hired to do a job in a gig economy environment. And how do you get them ready quickly, fast? And that's what we're trying to do with our technology. And we are partnering with AWS to deploy our solution and our platform on a global scale, and which allows us to have a very highly scalable, highly available platform, which is easily deployable by our enterprise customers. So just a quick introduction to our platform. As I described, it's being widely used by enterprises to basically scale readiness. The platform offers an enterprise-ready mobile experience, basically with AI and ML capability. And our end objective is to really create real sales advisors who are not transactional in nature, who can advise customers. And in the end, with these capabilities, you as sales management and marketing management can get a better outcome, better sales outcome, as they have a really good improved sales knowledge and skill set with the capabilities which we have put in place. If you want to learn more about it, please visit our website, or please send us an email, and we'll be very interested to talk about it. So now let me lead it to the next session. Basically, I'll stop sharing. And Mary, it's all yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited to be here and to share a couple of slides, and most importantly, really just have a dynamic conversation about sales readiness and why it's so critical in today's B2B selling environment. So to kind of set the stage for the discussion today, I thought I'd just talk about some overarching global trends that we're following here at Forrester. And I think the biggest thing is that buying and selling as we know it has completely transformed in 2021. And I call it the year of 2020, the year of putting the human back in selling. And you can see that even in remote selling situations, we had the ability to engage in really authentic and meaningful ways. And so here's just an example of one of our sales reps, one of our top sales reps at Forrester, who put together a sharing experience on video. We see video actually as one of the top formats for which buyers who could consume content in 2021, up significantly from 2020 and 2019. And so this example, Leah Arnold put together a coffee hour where she brings practitioners, experts, thought leaders together for very quick shares, not more than 10 minutes. And what was really interesting about this is she interviewed me for this session. And after the session, she edited the video, put it up on LinkedIn. And within 24 hours, she had about 20 requests to connect over LinkedIn from non-Forrester types of contacts. So when you're in sales, the ability to acquire those types of contacts is really, really important. And then on the right-hand side of this example, you see she's pitching a CEO of a pet manufacturing company and brought her pet into the discussion to be able to initiate that first contact. So we see the methods and the approaches pretty dramatically changing for salespeople as a result of the fact that many of us are still socially distant. And so we've looked at the implications of the larger global impact of COVID on the white-collar workforce. And what we found in the midst of 2020 was that 53% of workers who are currently remote hoped that they would stay working from home, or as Siemens calls it, working from anywhere when the crisis was over. 40% of the companies that we surveyed said they were going to fundamentally change their approach to sales organizational structures, and the way they go to market as a result of the impact of COVID. And then from our employee experience research, we find that we're predicting about 300% of pre-COVID levels will exist and work from home when the pandemic is over. So one of the reasons this is so important for today's discussion is that even as you have highly distributed direct and indirect sales forces, you're going to need to onboard new sellers, new partners. You're going to need to develop them, and you're going to need to make sure that they're ready to have that interaction wherever it may be, however it may take place, whether it's on a screen share like we are today, or over digital social channels, or however. The one thing I think that is going to be really crucial to think about is that our research shows that sellers are actually getting less time in front of the customer, in front of the buyer, as that buyer becomes more digitally activated and is able to do more on their own, whether that's going to peer review sites, going to sessions like this, going to do extensive research online, taking a demo on a supplier website. Sellers are only now getting about 16% of their actual time in the selling scenario. So that means that they need to be more ready than ever before to maximize that potential. So some of the environmental changes I just touched on really briefly, information ubiquity, we've been talking about that for some time. The millennial decision maker, we've also been talking about that for several years, and now we have millennials in the global workforce are about 50% of that workforce. And instead of just surfacing up suppliers to evaluate, putting together the short list, we're now seeing millennial decision makers from influencers to coaches to actual economic buyers, and that will continue to change. And this type of buyer is very comfortable in this setting, very comfortable in gathering the efficiencies that a remote and digital world provides. At Forrester, we've also been talking, and I know the market has for some time, around the consumerization of that business buyer, where buyers in the business world now expect and demand interactions that are very similar to what they have in their consumer life, whether that's the ability to search and get recommended content through a Netflix-like experience, or to get product recommendations surface up in a marketplace like Amazon. So we're seeing more and more of that expectation. I was at an event last year with some very, very traditional manufacturing companies, and I asked the CEOs, who are your most important competitive threats? Who do you worry about at night? And most all of them said Amazon, not because they actually compete directly with the company, but because Amazon and other types of consumer content providers are teaching their buyers how to buy and what to expect from that buying experience. And then finally, the COVID-19 pandemic, which is really causing us all to be remote, but in some ways connect more authentically, with more personalization as a result of insights and data that are derived from many of the rich systems and sales technologies that we can use to facilitate our interactions and engagements. Our research, and my research in particular, has shown that buying behavior has been changing for the last several years, and COVID and the hardships brought forth by the pandemic haven't created new buying scenarios or different buying preferences, so to speak. But what the situation has done is really amplified and created more urgency around some of those trends that are out there. So I've been following these for quite some time. Decisions are taking longer in the B2B world, particularly for those large enterprise sales, where you've got more and more buyers into the mix. We've been observing larger buy-side teams, and those buy-side teams are more and increasingly distributed. So even if you were going on site, oftentimes you'd actually have a large population of the buying committee dialing in or engaging remotely. And with those larger buying groups, you're naturally seeing longer decisions. The increasing distractions of your buyers. So there's so much information coming through many different pipes. And the salesperson now is no longer the only conduit to information into their firm or information about the product or solution that they represent, there's a plethora of other options to acquire information. And so the seller needs to really engage and cut through that noise in a way that's meaningful and personalized. And now with the proliferation of SaaS and as a service delivery models outside of just the pure tech space, you're seeing the risk of increasing churn, where depending on the complexity and size of the book of your business, 1 to 2% churn in the wrong direction on renewal rates can actually be disastrous for companies. So one of the things I did in my research this year was I was trying to get to, actually last year, I was trying to get to the heart of what some of the challenges were that B2B organizations and selling organizations in particular experienced as part of the selling process. And you can see some of the things that we talked about already, more buyers with competing in different agendas, which make the cycle take longer. We're also seeing the rise of procurement in the decision cycle and more influence from procurement representatives. And now in an economic environment where we've seen about 40% of businesses reduce the overall size of their sales force, we're seeing CFOs come in and be part of the decision-making process. That means that the situation is really, really difficult. And so these were the challenges that we saw in the survey of customers and by sell-side teams experiencing in the first 6 months of COVID, and much of the same challenges. So I really want to emphasize the changes that we're seeing in the buying and selling experience are really accelerated and amplified by COVID, not created. These are trends that have been in play for quite some time. I think at the outset of the pandemic, we saw a lot of angst and concern around how sales were going to take place in a remote digital environment. And 70% of B2B salespeople and managers and sales leaders felt that they couldn't be effective in a remote and digital setting. And now we're seeing many months later that sales continue to close. We continue to have events like these. Sellers are getting more and more proficient on using synchronous and asynchronous video. So I wanted to take a few moments to just talk about what the current skills and attributes are that sellers need to have. And what's really interesting about this is that when I was a chief revenue officer, I never would have hired for these skills. I probably would have hired someone who came from a competitor, someone who came from an internal employee review recommendation. Maybe I would actually hire someone from a supplier. And today we're looking at a very, very different skill set. Excuse me. So we need sellers, as I said, who can create and share videos, who are highly collaborative. Again, we're looking at larger sell-side teams. So the lone wolf seller isn't operating on their own. They need to understand data and engage in active listening. Maybe some of you saw the LinkedIn 2020 State of B2B Selling survey. Active listening was the #1 attribute that, that buyers were interested in sellers. And so a couple of other examples as well. So I have some research. Forrester is going to be publishing what we call a sales tech tide. And that's a big market landscape that's covering over 15 sales technologies. And we've evaluated those technologies. We've surveyed users and vendors of the ecosystem. And we used about 10 to 12 different analysts to weigh in. I was the lead author on this report, and I can't wait for it to come out for you all to see it. Because as business buyers, as sales tech buyers, the market and the ecosystem is really confusing. There's lots of different players out there. There's overlap. And organizations that we work with are trying to understand what the optimal sales tech stack is in today's environment. And so we believe sales readiness is what we call one of the foundational technologies that every sales organization should have, as well as extend those capabilities to their distributor network and their external partners. Again, for all of the reasons we just talked about, Even in this challenging environment, companies need to hire, onboard, develop, and ready up their sellers. And so without a sales readiness solution, it's impossible to do that. The other thing that's crucial about this is the ability to extract rich data and analytics and insights around what's working in your organization, what's not working, and tie those insights to the pipeline so that as heads of sales and heads of marketing and heads of enablement, you can start to make data-driven decisions around how best to support your sales organization. And your sales managers can get coaching on what the next best coaching activity is for their reps and the folks they support. So I know we're going to transition to some conversations with some wonderful practitioners that have been lined up for today's conversation. I'm super eager to hear them, but I wanted to just leave you with some very pragmatic advice. This is typical with Forrester. While we want to cover the entire spectrum of what's going on in the market in a particular sales category, want to give you advice that you can take away from this session today and implement right away. So, in a digital and remote environment, every seller, direct and indirect, needs to be hired, onboarded, developed, and readied for every single interaction they have. And again, remember that those interactions, as the buyer is taking over more self-discovery on their own, the actual interaction is shrinking. And so it's more important than ever for salespeople to be at an optimal level when they engage in those interactions. We're going to be talking about how to successfully scale your program more effectively in the latter part of today's discussion. And so I see so many mistakes that were made with CRM, and maybe you've made some of them, or you've seen them, or if there are actual sellers on today's session, you've experienced that, where CRM, big CRM purchases are made, rolled out to the seller. The seller's never engaged in the discovery education process, and then when the fields are rolled out, the workflow doesn't really have anything to do around how sellers conduct their day-to-day activities. And so I always recommend when we work with our clients to help them enlarge RFP creation and evaluation, bring a collection of seller advocates into the process, educate them, bring them in and help them understand what the use case is of the tool or technology that you're considering and purchasing. And then once you make that purchase, use those sellers to advocate and spread the word across the organization. And so when you're able to do this and bring people in early and often, you're going to have a much greater level of success than when marketing buys a solution and rolls it out to sales. The other thing we recommend is you start with pilots. And when you think about choosing pilot organizations, I say stack the deck. Pick that sales leader who wants to make a name for themselves, who loves technology and is digitally activated already, who wants to be an influencer and leader in the organization, and put the pilot within that leaders group so that you can stack the deck with someone who already is predisposed to wanting to make the solution successful. As you see, the buy side teams increase, so are the sell side teams increase. And the reason I put this in here as a review and overview here is that it's important not to arm just your direct sellers with these solutions, but really look at everyone who interacts in a market-facing capacity with customers and prospects. So that could be post-sale personnel, customer success, and a range of other types of resources who are going to be part of the process. And then I think this is an area that oftentimes we don't spend enough time talking about. And NK talked about this earlier, which is your distribution partners. In many cases, it makes sense to arm them and extend some of these tools out to them, because it will then bring your organization closer to your end customer, despite how you go to market with the rich data and analytics that can be extracted. And at the end of the day, all sellers are sellers, and they need these types of solutions in order to be successful. And then I think the biggest thing you want to think about is really how to consistently and constantly derive insights from the large data that you're able to acquire from top tier foundational solutions like sales readiness. So with that, thank you all for listening to my content, and I look forward to hearing some of the best practices from the others on the session today.
Hey, thank you, Mary. I really appreciate it. And I think that was an excellent presentation. Gave us some good insight to the changes that are taking place in the marketplace and how selling and getting sales teams ready is going to be more and more critical and important as we go forward. Okay, so now if you have questions, anybody, please feel free to, add your questions on the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Because the schedule is fairly tight, I'll want to go to the next session from Sumit. So Sumit, welcome, and look forward to your presentation.
Hi, everyone. This is Sumit from Castrol BP. Give me a moment while I put up my slides and let me know when you can see them. Just checking if all of you can see the slides.
Not yet.
Yep.
No.
No, we're not seeing the slides.
Give me a second. Now?
No.
My apologies. Just give me a minute. Let me just try it again. And yep, it should be fine, hopefully.
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry for that. Yep. So hello, everyone. So it was really very, very insightful to learn about all these changing trends, especially in the light of the pandemic. How it has changed the behaviors of the consumers and sellers. And I think a couple of key takeouts for me, Mary, were really the things about sales enablement. And I think the two keywords I picked up as a summary from your presentation were about the importance of how do we really create that amount of coaching and the micro learning at the point of sale. I think, and then that's exactly what I'll probably try to amplify in my session, and how we brought this to life using the platform. So just a quick one about Castrol. Castrol is all about selling oils, fluids, lubricants, whatever it takes to move the world. Whether it's cars or trucks or tractors, or even any kind of an industry, whether it's mining or shipping or manufacturing, we move the world. We sometimes call it internally as it's not just about oils, it's about liquid engineering. What's really powering Castrol today is the power of its technology, the aspiration to be a pioneer in terms of high performance lubricants. But what's very, very important for us, as we've learned in the previous session, that whatever the performance of your product is, and whatever the consumer value proposition a global marketing team has thought, if that is not translated at the point where the consumer is going to be experiencing your product, it really doesn't, it's not effective anymore. So it's very critical that at the moment of truth, where the consumer is going to be exposed to a salesperson, who's going to be talking about your brand or your product, that person should be very confident and passionate about how they translate the marketing proposition to this particular customer. And for us, that moment of truth is the auto repair workshops. For some of you who may not be familiar with this business and this industry, when the lubricants which you use in your cars and motorcycles and other vehicles are generally consumed at auto repair workshops. And this is the place where there's a very important influencer who comes into play, and that's the auto mechanic or the workshop owner, who has a very important influence on what a consumer would use in his or her vehicle. And this is quite a complicated chain, because imagine that let's take the case of a great product having been invented in a laboratory in UK, and a great campaign being thought over there. And how does that translate to a workshop mechanic who's basically in Singapore? And that's a very long chain of internal organization, then the route to market. And at any point in time, even if one of the links is not as effective or broken, your message won't get relayed to the final customer. And that's the challenge we have in this kind of a complex sales channel, where how do we really ensure that this weakest link, in our case, we identified two such elements, that the final sales rep, who's an employee of a distributor, when that sales rep walks into a workshop, how confident and knowledgeable is he to talk to the workshop about our products, the value proposition, and make the right offers. And similarly, when this mechanic who's going to be talking to our consumers, the final car owners, how confident is this mechanic, and how empowered is this mechanic in terms of translating that benefit to the consumer? And you can imagine, in this long chain, this chain can be very, very vulnerable. And the importance of this, importance of getting the messaging right is super critical. So our vision was to really create a set of advocates who are really confident in terms of translating our value propositions to the consumers, who are our brand advocates in the form of people who not only understand and appreciate what the brand does, but their belief and conviction is so strong that it creates a further experience of trust and transparency to the car owners. What we did was really about creating a community of mechanics and DSRs. Now, there's a story behind this, basically, that I still remember there was we had just finished conducting a massive training program, a 2-day workshop with a set of distributor sales reps in China, and each of those sales reps at the end of the program had to do a simple assessment, and they all passed and got the certificates. And 3 days later, I was in the market doing visits to a workshop along with the distributor and the sales rep, and I just happened to ask this particular sales rep about what he thought about why a particular brand was better than another one. And this sales rep struggled. And this person had just attended a program just a couple of days ago. And I experienced this similar kind of situation several times during my market visits. And I realized that it's so important that we keep on reinforcing a message in bite-sized information again and again and again. So you have a physical training, whatever you do, but it is so critical that there is a way we are able to empower this sales rep at that point of the moment of truth, when whatever information this person needs to able to close the sale with the workshop owner should be available, whether it is about knowledge of the brand, whether it is about what sales discounts are there, or about intelligent orders which can be made available to this person so that he can save time in terms of closing the sale. So I picked up this word about information ubiquity in Mary's presentation, and this is really about that. How do we create a situation where this person who's going to be making a sale to the customer has every information accessible to him at the point of sale, and that too in a manner which is easy to access and easy to kind of translate to the customer. And once you create such a community with all the DSRs, the distributor sales reps and the mechanics on your platform, there is a possibility that you create where you're able to convert these people who are average salespeople into masters. And that is done essentially through a very intensive level of engagement powered through analytics, where you're looking at which kind of scores these people are getting on various kind of assessments, and fine-tuning your content, fine-tuning your assessments, ensuring that you are actually customizing your learning and training needs to each sales rep. And that's the power of a platform which is driven by customized learning, and that too in the form of in the content which a salesperson would really be able to digest easily. And once you do that, you realize that these sales reps really can't live without this particular application, where this becomes a part of their life. My learning has been that if the application does not really empower the person, it won't be used. And that's the value we need to really create, that you need to ensure that the critical processes, which workshop do I go to today? What information do I need about this workshop? What are the products I need to sell today? What's the kind of, value story, or what are the kind of videos or demonstrations I want to show to my customers today? And that's all, that's all the kind of stuff a good salesperson would need in order to complete the sale. And once the salesperson realizes that they're able to do all of this seamlessly and in a very user-friendly manner, that's what encourages them to kind of really become advocates even of the platform. And to encourage the right behaviors, of course, it's very critical to reward the right behaviors, create the role models. And as I think Mary mentioned, not only is it important to find the right markets and pilots where you kind of have people to adopt these tools, but you also find the right champion salespeople, who are willing to kind of become the early adopters and then encourage and, create a whole sense of upliftment for the wider sales community as well. Just as a example of how dynamic and how innovative this thing can be, and once you have a channel created between your last point of sale, which is the sales rep, and the marketing community, you're able to customize content in any form. When COVID hit us, in the first quarter of last year, we realized that it was very important to educate our mechanics to stay safe, and to do things which are right, to ensure that consumers are not scared of walking into these workshops. And therefore, there was a need to create a sense of protection for the workshop owners, mechanics, as well as for the consumers. On the left of the screen, you see some of the content we created, which was very quick. Just like what Mary talked about, her experience of, it was super quick to kind of just, create some bite-sized content and videos and send it out as best practices and advice to our mechanics. This was done in the Middle East and the Saudi Arabian markets. And these videos were instantly, delivered to these mechanics, who very much appreciated that at a time when everybody was scared about what to do, and they were worried about their businesses not operating, efficiently because consumers were scared. Here was a solution which we empowered the sales reps and the mechanics with. And the result was, phenomenal, where we realized that not only did the engagement of, these mechanics with our products became, significantly better, but we also were able to realize significant improvement in sales. So in summary, I would just like to conclude that, platforms like these, have really given us a lot of learning opportunity. With each and every day, we have learned what more can we do. And it's just phenomenal about, we started with a simple intent that can we create a platform which will become, a bite-sized learning platform. But today where we have reached is a huge evolution from that point, where this kind of a sales readiness platform, or in fact, I would call it sales empowerment platform. It's not just enabling sales, it's empowering the salespeople. And this kind of a platform can actually become the single most important asset we have for our company. Thank you so much.
Excellent, Sumit. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was very insightful and very useful. I think, Mary, any questions, or from the panel? We can have a quick set of questions, from anybody.
Yeah, well, I thought that was a wonderful presentation and really wonderful examples. I love the examples of using the video and sort of the bite-sized chunks and delivery. Can you talk a little bit more about how your folks are using video and how that's facilitating the relationship and sales process?
Sure, Mary. Thanks for that question. So, videos have been very powerful, and videos have been two-way actually for us. So initially we thought that, we could use videos of, what do we need to do to help these mechanics, make a sale better. So that meant, videos around the product information, which was a starting point, but we quickly evolved into videos which help them how to interact with the customers, sales enablement skills. How do you manage your business better? So all those kind of, business improvement skills. But what we also realized was there was lots which these workshops and mechanics wanted to share with us. And therefore, through what we started as some promotions where we said, okay, show us how you sell our products to our consumers. And, whoever is the best, effective salesperson making a pitch, show us, put up your videos or show us how you're displaying our products in your markets. And we got plenty of user generated content back into our system, where mechanics were trying to, really showcase their prowess in how they were making the sales pitches to the car owners. And that became a huge learning platform for other mechanics. So it was empowering the community as such. So getting how some of the better mechanics were doing the job enabled other mechanics to learn from them. And that's the power of this kind of a platform.
Oh, thank you so much. That's great.
Okay. I do see one question from the audience. How does one ensure initial adoption and continued engagement of new tools?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think one of the most important things, any platform, today, if you're using WhatsApp, even if you have a scare around the privacy policies and you've downloaded Signal, you're not using it, right? Or you've downloaded Telegram, you're not using it. So the point over here is that your platform has to, first of all, as Mary mentioned, find people who are really keen to be those early adopters, people who have their skin in the game, people who have an aspiration to prove a point to someone that, I am the pioneer, I am the leader, I am the one, or people who are really visionary in terms of trying new stuff. So these are always, you have to pick up the early adopter markets or early adopter salespeople to kind of really starting as a starting point. For me, a very critical next point is about if your platform is not part of the daily processes, if it is not part of the daily activity, then it will become a passive platform. So you need to find a way that there is a reason that this particular, whoever your target audience is, in this case, the seller, sales rep, how do you make sure that the sales rep cannot conduct his daily business without coming to this platform, and how useful you make it for this particular sales rep? As I said, our starting point in the journey was we just wanted to share content, bite-sized content with the sales rep so that the sales rep is armed with the information. But that was a great starting point, but not enough. Because once you've seen the videos and once you've seen the content, how do we ensure that the person is coming back to the platform again and staying there? And therefore, creating quizzes or creating, check-ins and checkouts at the outlets to show how much, efficiently are you doing your sales calls, and how, if you are basically logging your transactions onto this app, it's also becoming a part of your incentive program. So making it almost like a app you can't really live without. So from not only it's your coach and your trainer, it's your repository of all information, but it's also something which helps you do your daily job so well that it guarantees you your incentives. So that would be my sharing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, looks like there are a lot more questions which are there, but maybe we do not have the time to answer all of them. So I'll sort of type the answers a little later. We'll have to move to the next session. So I'll sort of give way to Harley. Harley, all yours.
Thanks, Chari. All right, can everyone see this?
Yes, everybody can see it.
Great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about scaling and how to build closed loops that support that. And really that's about a mechanism for more. My name is Harley Young, and as Troy said at the outset, I lead our partner solutions architecture team here at AWS in ASEAN. And that means my team and I work with our partners to help them achieve those business aspirations that they set by providing really prescriptive business and technical enablement, certification, and supporting them as they work with customers to deliver a resounding impact. Since our beginning at Amazon, we've strived to be Earth's most customer-centric company. This is a really broad statement, meaning it doesn't restrict anyone to the domains or the markets that we enter. The mission isn't defined by an industry or a geography or by a technology. So you'll notice that it says nothing about products like books or e-commerce or anything like that. But while the mission is broad, it's also really specific, and it helps us make decisions. So often the tie-breaking decision in questions, the tie-breaking question in a decision that we're trying to make is this thing that we're doing customer obsessed? And what is the best thing that we could be doing for our customer? And since our founding in 1994, we've applied that same approach across an increasingly diverse business. And one of the ways that customer obsession shows up is by listening to customers and inventing on their behalf. More than 90% of the new features and services on the Amazon Web Services platform come from feedback that we've received from customers. And that sort of reminds me of something that Sumit said when he was talking about the content that's being pushed out to salespeople. Those salespeople are actually customers of a team that's focused on field enablement. And I'll talk a little bit more about the ways that some of that bidirectional feedback can work in a minute. But at Amazon, when we talk about invention, Amazon itself is packed with people like what my sister described me as being in high school, which perhaps because I ran the high school calculus club, was as a member of the nerd herd. And so you have this sort of unrestrained, often engineering geeky zeal for expressing anything in the form of an algorithm. And so when we think about invention, we often express it or encapsulate that idea in this equation here, which is that innovation is a function of four things. Organization, by which we mean the way that we structure and organize our teams. Times architecture, which is about the way that we structure and organize systems, to the power of mechanisms and culture. And in an Amazon context, mechanisms has a very special meaning. So Jeff Bezos has a very famous presentation where he talks about this recurring problem, something that happens over and over and over again. And so like many companies, you might be tempted to pull a team together and say, come on, you guys, we need to try harder, we need to do better. And when you do that, essentially, you're just asking for good intentions. And so no surprise, that rarely works. Because when you're asking for good intentions, you're really not asking for a change. People already arrive to work with good intentions. And so if good intentions don't work, what does? Well, mechanisms work. A mechanism is a complete process or a virtuous cycle that reinforces and improves itself as it operates. At Amazon, we build tools, either a software or a process, and then you drive adoption of that tool, inspect the results to see whether we're having the impact that we intended, and then you improve on that mechanism. When I quickly looked in some of the questions earlier, I saw a question, I don't recall who asked it, but it was about how do you get mechanics to try this tool? I think Sumit touched on that a little bit when he said that you basically need to insert the process into someone's workflow so that it becomes essential to do it, not in a way that introduces friction, but one where it becomes an opportunity to amplify the impact that someone is having, and they come to count on that as almost having an assistant or someone that is helping accelerate the work that they're doing. And so that's what we think about when we think about adoption. So you can invent an amazing tool, but if you don't come up with a clear way to get people to adopt it, then it's not going to be successful. And so when you design mechanisms, not only do you have to come up with that piece of software or tool or the process that you want people to follow, but you need to also think deeply about that adoption mechanism. But lots of organizations stop there. They roll out a new tool, whether it's CRM or some other sales enablement tool, and they convince people to use it. But often that use is ephemeral or temporary because it's missing an inspection mechanism, which means if you roll out a sales enablement tool to people and all it is a unidirectional thing where you're saying, here's a bunch of content that you can use to improve the sales process, and then you provide a quiz to them to test them on how they did it, all you're doing is getting information from the sales teams about their performance on that assessment. You're not actually providing them an opportunity to evaluate you, to say, you gave me this information, but it actually didn't help me sell anything more effectively. And so it's super critical to set up that inspection mechanism to make sure that the hypothesis that you have when you introduce the tool in the first place and the metrics that you establish are actually being met, so that you are sure that the inputs that you're feeding into this process are getting converted into the outputs that you desire in the way that is most efficient and the most effective. Each company, of course, needs to come up with its own mental model. And in a sales organization, perhaps you have a mental model that maybe the deeper that your sales teams understand the capabilities of the technology that you're selling, then maybe they'll be able to make more cognitive leaps between what each product can do and the business outcomes that it can drive for customers in an industry. So you devise an approach to equip teams with new product knowledge, and you drive adoption of it by selecting a product that allows for consumption and reinforcement of that learning in bite-sized pieces. And then, this is the critical piece, you need to measure that in both directions and adjust your approach. That input of this mechanism is the opportunities, and the output is sales. And that's what we do at Amazon. We have a whole series of mechanisms used for everything. And it's those mechanisms that enable you to scale your business, because they allow you to take a process and constantly refine it and get better and better and better at it. And for each one of those things that you introduce, you're able to continually engage in that process of efficiency and optimization. And I think you'll find that using a concept of a mechanism to think about your business, whether it's like a catalyst for innovation because it allows you to run lots of experiments, or helps you simply engage people in different ways and bring new ideas to market, creates really powerful outcomes. And so I'd like to add a couple of things to your go-do list. It's one of my favorite things to do at the end of every talk that I give. The first one is go and watch this video about lean enterprise and the idea of experimental or hypothesis-driven development in an enterprise context. And the second is connect with me on LinkedIn. You can do both of those things by just taking a photo of that QR code, or you can type in that URL if that's easier. And with that, I'd like to wrap up and hand things back to Chari.
Great. Thank you, Harley. And I think talking about how to reinvent ourselves and how to look at a constant method of improving, I think is a critical success factor in technology adoption and making technology very useful for people. And I think that's a very important aspect. Okay, let's move to Kushal, because we have just have 5 more minutes. So we may have to extend it by another 5 minutes maximum. So Kushal, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Harley. It was good talk and helping me introduce a mechanism right now. So one of the critical processes or the mechanisms in sales enablement ends up being, how do you measure sales readiness? So enterprises or organizations actually train their salespeople. This is something that most organizations do. And usually they end up spending a lot of money doing it. Right? There's an abundance of data, which shows that if you spend a lot on sales readiness programs, you will attain some sort of nirvana and you will outperform your competition. Right? So while this data is there, most companies generally don't have a good understanding of how they are deriving business value from these initiatives, right? And how to continuously improve upon the initiatives. So Sumit touched upon continuous improvement. So you need to be able to convert these initiatives into competitive, long-standing competitive differentiation. So the impact of sales readiness programs today, when we speak to a lot of our customers, we are given to understand that the way they measure impact is usually conducting surveys of the attendees who have attended training programs, or counting the number of people who have completed a digital learning program. But that's kind of not good enough, right? If you want to create or if you want to differentiate yourself, and Mary spoke about how the whole sales readiness or what the kind of skills that you need in today's context is increasingly different from what you traditionally had. So you need to be able to measure these skills, and you need to be able to assure yourselves that these things are working for you, right? Now, it is important, therefore, to be able to measure these in a real world setting, and you should adopt an investor mindset. So measure the real world outcomes and to invest in the readiness programs that are working for you and build the resources that work for you. So I'm going to introduce a very simple approach that you can get started with. And this is something that we advocate and put into practice with most of the customers who work with us. So the first and foremost is, while you need to have a good understanding of indicators for sales readiness. Companies usually have very good understanding of indicators for sales performance improvements, and we have seen things like share of wallet, premiumization, growth rates, quota attainment. There are lots of sales performance measurement indicators that companies use. But we haven't seen really good examples of indicators that measure the sales readiness, right? So you should build one first and foremost. The second thing is you need to establish a framework for continuous measurement. Sales is dynamic environment. The competitors are changing their products, their approaches. There's a lot of churn. You lose people, you gain people. So it's a very, very dynamic environment. So you need to have a method where you are continuously measuring the sales readiness of your field, right? And once you've attained that, actually you need to then create the input-output relationship between sales readiness metric, the indicators and the real-world outcomes, and to review and revise this input-output mechanism frequently, right? So 1, 2, 3. Simple enough, very difficult to put in practice. So let's talk a little bit about some very basic ideas of how you can get started doing that. So the first step is you need to design a sales readiness indicator, right? So what we do is when we work with our clients, we actually have a single enterprise indicator for measurement. Now, this measurement needs to have a few attributes. First is you need to have some objectives, right? The objectives could be certain product lines or some skill sets. You have, go ahead, build any number of objectives and just start documenting them. The second attribute is a way to measure. It's really an algorithm. And we have seen examples of simple approach, which is just, I'm going to give some 10 questions to every salesperson every month, which are measuring against these objectives. And then I'm going to just see what is the proportion of correct answers they give. Or, on our system, you can enable some more complex methods, which is, you have modeled, what is the knowledge erosion over time. You have modeled what is the difficulty level of each question based on a given population. There are all kinds of complications that you can bring in. And we have seen examples of customers using very simple approaches on our platform to very complex approaches on our platform, right? You will improve this indicator over time, and it usually becomes some kind of an ensemble method. The third thing that you need to have are entities. Now, the very base minimum entities you need to have is a user, a role, a business unit, and you could have any other number of measurement units. You are basically going to aggregate around it. But one of the most important things is you should be doing it at a user level. So every individual salesperson is important and critical for your success. So you need to be able to understand the skills and skills distribution of every single salesperson. Now, there are a couple of ways that our customers use it. The first, you can see over here already. So here's an example of a distribution of the various, what we call objectives for a given salesperson. And you can compare them what is the desired level across the population, right? So the other way that we have seen customers aggregate this is, you map out all the critical objectives, and then you have all the business units or whatever entities you want to measure them by. And over here, you can see an example of, on objective 3, you have unit 4 and 5 performing very well. But objective 1, you have 3 units performing very badly. If objective 1, which says a particular product that you are on to focus on this quarter, is important for you, then you have a problem. So you need to design some interventions around that. Right? Step 2 is you have to track, you have to create a framework for measuring and tracking this continuously, right? And without that, it is not worth. It is not good enough to do this in the beginning of the year in your sales kickoff, right? And not to revisit this thereafter. So you need to put a mechanism in place to do it continuously. So we have customers who are running 100,000 assessments every month on our platform, right? Now, the way then the outcome that it delivers is, you can then see, here's an example of a very simple approach where assessments are given to salespeople, gamified, very small, brief assessments. They're rewarded with points, and they can convert that into vouchers and all of that stuff. So engagement is a very different thing. We can do a webinar on that later. But here's an example of an individual salesperson last year. This is a real example. Last year from Jan until this Jan, how their actual skill has improved continuously throughout the year. And we have examples where the skills have gone down as well. But I'm giving you an example where it has gone up. And this is what you want to see continuously for salespeople. This is something that you want to keep an eye on, right? The other way that you can use, and this is something we do, which is we actually help you classify these skills distributions along 3 dimensions: needs improvement, meets expectation, exceed. And this is at an individual with a single objective. You can see how they rank and where they need to be and where they are. This is an information we actually can make available to the user so that they're continuously motivated to move up this scale, right? Now, this is easier said than done. So, we use a lot of technology. So one of the big challenges is, how do you design and distribute, these assessments? How do you engage people? How do you get completion rates to be very high? So there's complete, engineering around that. But a few very important things: you have to use automation. You have to personalize these questions, because different people are at different skill level. Different people have joined the organization at different times. So if you give the same thing to everybody, that will very, very quickly create disengagement with your best users, right? The other thing is, you should attempt to do dynamic classification so that you don't have to get involved. The system keeps track of where the user is with respect to their required objectives, where they need to be, and then you can make automated interventions if you do that. The third and most important probably is that you need to have a good understanding of what matters and what doesn't, right? It's very easy to create a lot of objectives and a lot of skills and stuff like that, but it is very important for you to understand and invest time in understanding what should matter and what should not, because it's very easy to create a lot of noise in this process. So you need to be able to differentiate between signal and noise. Now, here's a great example, right? We have 4 objectives over here. And you can see that objective 1 and objective 2 actually has good correlation with premiumization. Premiumization is something that our customers use as sales indicator, which is what percentage of sales is delivered for each individual salesperson for a product group that which is a premium product. Our sales objective is therefore to increase the share of that percentage. So that's what we call premiumization. And it's just simple percentage. But over here, you can see the objective 3 and 4 are pretty much random. It does not correlate very well. So we may want to throw them out, and we want to keep objective 1 and 2 and focus on these 2 objectives. Now, these things change. Sales, in our experience over the last 3-4 years, has been that the only way to do this successfully is to have a process by which you review and revise, and if possible, do it automatically. And that's where some of the machine learning stuff that we do is critical in order for you to automatically select the objectives which are important, and then automate the interventions that are necessary for that. One of the things to remember is that this is there is a difference between correlation and causality. So it is worthwhile to invest some time in data science processes so that you can investigate thoroughly and say, over a period of time, you can create a deeper understanding of what has a causal relationship. Some of the objectives will have deep causal relationship with the outcomes, and some of them will just be correlated. You may want to think about the ones which have causality, right? But you would not know that on day one. The only way to know it is collect a lot of data, do these things, do this process, and have this process of putting together a mechanism for continuously looking, evaluating, and updating yourself. Now, this is my last slide. So, and yesterday when I was on LinkedIn, I saw this caption from Reuters. It says, some organizations react to change, build yours to prepare for it. And I liked it, and I said, okay, I'll borrow it for this session. But really, this is what it is about, right? The world is changing quite rapidly, and we see it, not just COVID, but the digitization and there are various other factors which are changing the scenario for us. Most organizations are struggling to react to these changes, right? I think great organizations will start thinking ahead, and they will start thinking about building themselves the core capability to prepare for change, right? And there's a lot of things, remote sales, and Mary spoke about a lot of things. Sumit spoke about it. I'm not going to go through that, but really, what you are attempting to do eventually is you may want to consider serious automation in this area, right? Because what we have realized is that it is not possible to manually scale attention to every single user. And what each and every user is looking for is attention, it's personalization, it's guidance, it's nudging them, it's letting them do the things proactively, getting ahead of them, right? You cannot do it with manual processes. You got to think about automation on day 0. And if you need to think about automation on day 0, if you want to create an organization which is getting ahead of the change, you may want to start with building the right sales readiness indicator. So that's my call to action for you. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Kushal. And okay, so we are at we extended our time by 10 minutes, and thank you very much for everybody to stay for for the extended period of time. I will stop the training at this moment, and I will send out a link for a survey. Please do fill it up and let me know how you enjoyed this webinar, and what else can we do to provide some new ideas, new tech thoughts to take it forward. We are in the field of sales readiness, and if you're interested to talk about sales readiness, please give us a call. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time you all spent with us, and thank you. Yes, we will include the decks in our email. We will send that across to everybody. You will also have a link to this webinar. So if you want to listen to it again and gain some more new ideas, please, you can feel free to log in and check it out. Thank you. Thank you very much. And bye for now.